Hey everyone, my name is Craig,
I'm Tim.
and we are the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. JD Vance has been picked as President Trump's VP pick. So, Tim, how do you feel about him, and what are your overall thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. We have a pick. So JD Vance was probably in my top three of people I thought would likely be chosen. Um, all of the talk about Marco Rubio or Byron Donalds, a congressman from the Naples area, didn't see them in the picture because they're all from the same state, and as a Constitution reads, you're not allowed to have a vice president or president from the same state. And I thought that J.D. Vance fit a lot of boxes as far as the Rust Belt and trying to get some of those swing states. So I thought that was a big feather in his cap, and I think overall, because of his demeanor and a little bit of his history, he's a relatively new senator. So I thought that there was a high likelihood of Trump picking him, which is why I had him in my top, three, four picks.
Understandable, and I definitely think he's a strong pick too. The county party, you recently had a showing of the movie about his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. What can you tell us about that and his life story?
So do you know what elegy stands for, or what it means?
I don't. I could take a guess, but
Take a guess.
like a story.
Well, it's
an ode.
actually a poem that's fashioned as to an ode to the dead, believe it or not. So I think he's paying homage to the hillbilly folks of his childhood in that area of, I think, West Virginia is where he came from, West Virginia or Kentucky. Which was it?
I'd have to check on that.
I think it was West Virginia. Anyway, so I think it was an ode to them and the ode to the heritage of that area, if I had to guess. I didn't look at the preface or anything like that, but you're right. We did show the movie here locally. It is Hillbilly Elegy. It is a memoir J.D. Vance wrote about the time of when he was in, or just soon after he'd gotten out of Yale Law School. It was made into a movie by Ron Howard. Big, obviously Happy Days. Ron Howard's a huge producer. Him and Brian Glazer were the executive producers on the movie. And, the movie was pretty good. It was really good. And it really kind of bounced back and forth between the time that he was actually writing it when he was in Yale and then back to the time when he was a childhood. And the whole time he's really trying to figure out what it is about his life. And it even starts out with this sort of epiphany that he's found a piece of the puzzle, and I think the puzzle is really kind of his life. And frankly, I think we're all at some point in our life trying to figure out why we are who we are. And I think JD's stance is really that he's come from what otherwise would have been very trying and almost impossible circumstances in probably any other country but America. And he was sort of the overcomer in the story. But there's actually a lot of overcomers in the story. His mother's a massive drug addict, kind of bounced from man to man. And as we saw in the Republican National Convention, when he did his acceptance speech, he pointed out his mom and remarked that she was 10 years sober now. So I think it's pretty impressive. I've known people with similar backgrounds, and they're not as fortunate as JD. And I think some of his self-discipline, being a Marine, going to Yale, graduated from Ohio State before that in 2 years, I think is really pretty remarkable considering the circumstances. But it really is an American story about being able to make something out of what is otherwise nothing.
Interesting. Okay. Sounds as though he really built himself up from his bootstraps and was able to make something strong out of himself from not much. And given the adversities he faced, was really successful in doing that. I think that really would inspire people in the Rust Belt because he shares a similar background to them. How do you think this impacts the electoral map?
Well, again, I heard about the Kristi Noems of the world being potentially on the VP list, but strategically, if you kind of look out over the horizon, I don't think she brings enough electoral college votes to the table. specifically for a presidential race. And when you look at somebody like J.D. Vance, you can pull in Michigan, you can pull in Wisconsin, you can pull in Ohio, you can pull in Pennsylvania. You start that starts putting a lot of marks on the tally sheet. So again, I actually had thought there would be some consideration for Sarah Sanders out of Arkansas. She was Trump's press secretary, can handle herself, very versed in the swamp, so to speak. But I think Arkansas only brings 4 electoral college votes, but I thought it was a little bit of a long shot, but just thought because of the familiarity there, she's now the governor of Arkansas, youngest female governor, maybe only female governor in Arkansas history. But I totally missed on that. I don't think she even made the short list. So I think, moving forward with JD, I think they'll be able to concentrate, again, a lot of those Rust Belts. Hate to kind of keep harping on that, but that's where this election is really going to be lost or won. States like ours, Florida, are we're up 1 million Republicans now in the registrations. So Florida's kind of a little bit of a lock. I don't think they're going to put as many resources into Florida per se as some of those other swing states, and probably rightfully so. If money doesn't, there's not an endless supply of money, so you've got to really divide and conquer, so to speak. So I think that's where they're going to end up putting a lot. I think a lot of the surrogates are going to get to those other states like Florida, maybe down even into South Carolina, Texas, those sorts of things. I thought that the rally that they had, the first one after the nominations were accepted, went pretty well, but I actually didn't see much coverage of that. Did you see any of that?
I saw clips of it, yeah. And it seems one of my friends told me that he doesn't think J.D. Vance is a good spokesman, a good speaker, but based on what I saw, I think he's really superb, very articulate, and does a great job conveying his message.
He was well received, I assume?
Yeah, for sure. Especially the most recent rally in Minnesota, talking about how he served the country, he put his life on the line, and Trump took a bullet for the country, while Kamala Harris questions their loyalty to America.
Yeah. I don't think Kamala Harris is in any position to question anything.
Right.
At this point, they're already trying to walk back everything that they ever said about her. This whole what a joke last week was with the whole, she was never named the border czar. That's
right.
So pathetic. It just smells of desperation. I think Kamala Harris is a continuation of Obama, a continuation of Biden. I mean, for crying out loud, she was the first one out of the Democrat primary at the last go-around. I think at that point she was polling less than 2%. And, to have this, complete turnaround, it's so fake, it's so transparent, and it's pathetic is an understatement as far as I'm concerned, but a total waste. And you can just see that the media is literally in real time living up to every criticism that they have withstood over the last 20 years or whatever. I mean, it's completely on full display. Anybody who can't see it now, if you can't see it now, I don't know what's going to help you.
Right, exactly. And just to think of, I don't know, how unpopular she was in the Democrat primary, and then going on with the Democrats keep saying they're the party of democracy and all that, but then they get rid of Biden, who 14 million people voted for, and they replace him with Kamala.
Yeah.
So
they're total liars.
Right.
They're total liars, yeah.
Exactly. Where's the democracy in that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I hate the word democracy. It drives me absolutely crazy, and plenty of people use it. We're not a democracy. It doesn't appear in the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't appear in the Constitution. Democracy is 3 wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. Where when you have a constitutional republic, you have the rights of the minority protected by the rule of law. And that's really what this country is about. It's not about mob rule and the democracy. I'm sure the left would love for it to be about mob rule because, hey, if they could just convince people 50% plus one to do whatever, then they get what they want, which is definitely not not good for anybody. Because as Holden talks about on the show all the time, as long as you have a central bank that can print money, you just get politicians who are willing to give away the most amount of stuff for your vote. And it's not a high bar to get to 50% plus one if you're just giving everybody whatever they want.
Right, exactly. We've got to be logical voters, not just voting for whoever's going to give us the most stuff.
Well, isn't that kind of why we're in this predicament now? Because it's just about, we all want what we want. Central bank just goes and prints all the money, and there's no long vision about, oh, goodness, you print a bunch of money, it devalues the money, all of a sudden everything that used to cost $1 now costs $2 because the value is cut in half. It's like people need to understand the ramifications of the decision. And the fact is, I'm obviously in government, I'm city commissioner in Newberry, and you look and, and almost intentionally by design, government is one of the most inefficient allocators of resources, right? So the more you put into a governmental system, the more inefficiencies you're creating. So you're going backwards, in that scenario. So what we really need to do is strip government down to its constitutional roots, bare bones it to its constitutional roots, Article 1, Section 8, and just stay there. Reserve the rest of the states to the people. We create a much more efficient system. It's going to free up in tons of economies of scale. I know you were fighting with Holden the other day about expenses and spending. That's really where the rubber meets the road, is the spending. It's ungodly, and when the government is involved, it's going to be less. If it was 20% less inefficient than the private sector, and you move it out of the government into the private sector, you've already picked up 20% of your efficiencies in the blink of an eye. I mean, you're not going to be a senator of a state like Ohio if you can't have a decent speech or pitch or an elevator talk. So, no disrespect to your friend, but you don't become a senator if you can't talk. Is really what it boils down to. So I'm not sure where he's coming from with that necessarily. He may be just kind of looking at it in the vacuum or something. But I don't know. I think when you turn the switch from senator to vice presidential candidate, there's probably going to be a minute where you need to kind of take a step back, realize what you've accomplished, and take a little bit of pride in what you did. Maybe you slip up a little bit for a couple of days before you kind of get back into the swing of it. I'm sure he's on a life-building moment kind of high coming out of that convention, because, boy, the convention just seemed like it was crazy good energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think something that Vance's detractors point to, primarily on the Republican side, is his alleged underperformance in 2022. But let's take a further look at that. With the race against Tim Ryan, the incumbent Democrat Ohio senator back then, Vance was outspent by $41 million, whereas the Democrats in other races were really just sacrificial lambs against incumbent Republicans who were more, had more Democrat appeal, like Mike DeWine, who ordered lockdowns in the state of Ohio. So you got that mix of votes there that wouldn't necessarily work for a presidential election, and the fact that gubernatorial candidates often outperform senatorial candidates. So there's a lot going on that I think people underestimate Vance, saying, oh, he only won by 6 points, Trump won by 8 points. But you have to look at the bigger picture and really see what's going on, especially given that Tim Ryan was the incumbent in Ohio and had some appeal to the white working class vote.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, Ohio, the real race was in the Republican Party. I think somewhat the Democrats had already been written off at that point because the primary in Ohio, if memory serves, was actually really pretty brutal. So they probably beat each other up pretty well in that race before they even got to the general. But I could be wrong. One of our viewers could take a look at that and correct me if I am.
Yeah, no, I believe that's correct, and it was a tough primary because certainly a big state to win. Additionally, we're 100 days out from Election Day, so that's rapidly approaching.
I don't. I would be curious. What do you think J.D. Vance feels from a youth person's perspective? The new voter, the 18-year-old voter, I think he's 39, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a new voter at 18. This is their first opportunity to vote, up to, let's say, the 30-year-olds. Maybe they just got out of college. Maybe they're in their first career job. Heck, maybe they've even gotten married and are on their first kid or something like that. Does J.D. Vance appeal to that, and how?
Yeah, I think he certainly does. He's more relatable than a lot of the other potential VP contenders who are being looked at because he is young. He brings youthful energy to the table.
Yep.
And additionally, he understands the problems that young people face, having built himself up from a difficult background in his personal life story, as well as understanding the challenges that, say, mass immigration presents to young people with crime and driving up housing prices, making it more difficult to start a family, and addressing the fact that families are so important to society.
I believe I read somewhere where he said basically when he was coming out of college, one of his goals was to start businesses that could help that exact demographic of people. And the only negative that I've read about him, and I don't even know if it's true yet, is when he went to work with some of these tech companies or worked in the tech industry, that he actually got a lot of money from a gentleman named Peter Thiel, Thiel, who I have seen his name before as well, but again, haven't been able to research it. But that was really one of the only negative things that I found about him. And even that negative is being applied sort of in hindsight because, if you're already in the tech, you're already in there, you kind of learn who the players are. He didn't have any concept of, his political future, I don't think, at that point. So again, hindsight's always 20/20. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do know the New American, a magazine published by the company I work for, the John Birch Society, rates all of the reps and all the senators on a constitutional basis. J.D. Vance just scored 100% constitutional. So every one of the votes that were scored, he scored 100%. Got every single one of them right. You know how many other senators got 100%?
None?
Huh?
None?
2.
Wow, okay.
2 other ones. You know who they were?
Rand Paul.
Yes.
And Ted Cruz.
Mike Lee.
Okay.
Mike Lee. Where you have a Senate who, under Senate Republicans, as a whole on that chart, scored on, I think, 56 or 59%, essentially failing their constitutional responsibilities, right? But J.D., Mike Lee, and Rand Paul, 3 senators, all got a perfect score, which that's pretty darn good in my book. You can look that up at thefreedomindex.org or just look up Freedom Index online, and you can look up not only J.D. Vance, but you can look up all the senators and all the representatives on that website.
Okay, well, great to see that he has such a strong record because I think that's going to reassure a lot of perhaps people who are hesitant about Trump and lower propensity voters who he needs to get out and vote this election. But given that now we have J.D. Vance as the VP pick and the emphasis on the Rust Belt, does that make it more likely that Kamala Harris picks someone like Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania as her VP pick?
I have no idea. I really hadn't even given it too much thought what she would potentially go for in a VP pick. I think let's call them up-and-coming Democrat candidates, and there's so few of them because they've done a horrible job at building their bench. None of them are going to hook their train or hook themselves to that train. I mean, that the Harris, the whole Obama, Biden, now Harris administration is the Titanic. They're just all they're doing right now in the Democrat Party is rearranging the deck chairs. That sucker is going down, and it's going down fast. So I don't think you're going to get anybody respectable who thinks they have any future in the Democrat Party getting involved in that campaign. They're going to sit it out. They're going to wait until 2028 because, let's face it, you got 100 days left. You're not going to be able to do a whole heck of a lot in 100 days. And I think that's part of the reason why they picked Harris, because she's kind of a known commodity. I think she is, what do you call it when you have not like willing participants, but she's sort of the sacrificial lamb. That's what I was trying to think of. And no offense to Christians, but I think she's the sacrificial lamb there. You know, who do you think Vivek has any chance of replacing Vance as the senator from Ohio if in fact they get elected? Because DeWine's going to have to actually appoint his replacement. DeWine will have that responsibility. And Vivek's from Cleveland. I think his national headquarters were actually in Columbus, but I think he's from Cleveland.
Okay. I think that DeWine's going to appoint Matt Dolan for the Senate seat, given that J.D. Vance beat him and the two of them are close together and good friends. I think that Vivek will want to be in the Trump administration in some fashion, and he's going to try and fight for that.
Well, you're teaching me something. I hadn't remembered about Dolan. I think Vivek could potentially go either way. I think Vivek also, he's got a foot in the libertarian circles as well as the Republican circles, and that's one actual thing that I really like about him. I think he does have some baggage that they'll kind of have to clean up as far as I think he was actually a pretty big proponent of some of the big pharma and biological solutions to COVID and different things, but that's also kind of his background, right? So I guess we shouldn't be surprised about that. Where do you think that Vivek fits in the administration then?
I think something dealing with finances, perhaps even chair of the SEC, given that he is very strongly in favor of Bitcoin, and Trump has stated that he would replace Gary Gensler, who's a disaster. I thought that going into the Biden administration 4 years ago, given that Gary Gensler had lectured about Bitcoin, that he would at least be supportive, and he's turned out to be the exact opposite.
You know, it's funny because, with the show, we've got the whole group chat that we have going on our phones. I'm very impressed with what questions you guys come up with for each other. I never even heard of the guy, Gary Gensler, before it came up in the thread. So kudos to you guys for knowing some of that stuff. It's good.
Fair, yeah. And, as a crypto investor, I like to pay attention to, the regulations going on. And Gensler is no friend of Bitcoin, no friend of crypto, so he's got to go.
Well, because they can't have control.
Right, exactly.
That's all they're about. So if you want to close us out?
Yeah. Thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m. And if you'd like to reach out to us, feel free at youthbombs@electoralrepublicans.com. Thanks so much, everyone.
Take care.